Welcome to Benezet, Pennsylvania, the heart of Elk Country. Nestled in the Pennsylvania wilds, this small town is home to the largest free-roaming elk herd east of the Mississippi River. Their history and the conservation efforts that have made this region a haven for wildlife enthusiasts. Let us begin our journey. In the lush forest of Pennsylvania, where the Allegheny Mountains stretch their green cloak fingers toward the sky, a majestic creature roams with a presence as old as the hills. The elk, Pennsylvania's regal woodland monarch, is a testament to nature's resilience and human conservation efforts. Once upon a time, the eastern elk, a subspecies unique to the region, wandered freely across the state's expansive woodlands. Their bugles echoed through the valleys, and their antlered silhouettes stood proudly against the horizon. However, as settlers arrived and the land changed, the eastern elk faced a dire fate. By the late 1800s, the last native elk in Pennsylvania had vanished, a ghost of the wilderness that once was. But the story of the Pennsylvania elk did not end there. In the early 20th century, a vision for restoration took root. The Pennsylvania Game Commission, recognizing the loss of this magnificent creature, embarked on an ambitious project. Between 1913 and 1926, they released 177 Rocky Mountain elk into the wilds of Pennsylvania. These transplants adapted, thrived, and multiplied, giving rise to a new chapter in the state's natural history. Today, over 1,000 elk roam the Pennsylvania wilds. Their numbers attribute to the success of one of the most remarkable wildlife restoration stories in the Northeast. Visitors from near and far come to witness these giants of the forest, to hear their haunting calls, and to feel the pulse of the wild that beats strong in the heart of Pennsylvania. The elk of Pennsylvania are more than just animals. They are symbols of hope, of what can be achieved when we work with nature rather than against it. They remind us that even when something precious is lost, with care and dedication, it can be brought back to grace the earth once more. And so the elk continue to write their narrative, one that is intertwined with the very essence of Pennsylvania's wild spirits. Elk in Pennsylvania exhibit a range of fascinating behaviors that reflect their complex social structures and adaptability to the environment. Here are some insights into their behavior. Rutting season. During the early fall, male elk enter the breeding season known as the rut. This period is marked by captivating displays of dominance, such as bugling, antler wrestling, and herding groups of females. The bugle is a unique call that can be heard for miles, used by mature bulls to attract females and assert dominance over other males. Diet. Classified as herbivores, elk primarily graze on grasses and forbs such as timothy, alfalfa, clovers, and other cool and warm season grasses. Elk are herd animals and exhibit behaviors that ensure the survival and well-being of the group. They move together, feed together, and even protect each other from potential threats. Elk may migrate seasonally to find food, moving from higher elevations in the summer to lower areas in the winter. Female elk, called cows, give birth to calves in the late spring and early summer. Calves are born with spots that help camouflage them from predators. Bull elk grow and shed their antlers annually. The antlers, which can be quite large and impressive, are used during the rut to compete for mates. Understanding these behaviors is essential for wildlife enthusiasts and conservationists who visit Pennsylvania's elk country, as it helps ensure that the wild essence of the elk herd remains for generations to come. What is the best time to observe elk in Pennsylvania, you may ask? Well, the best time to observe elk in Pennsylvania is during the mornings and evenings. These are the times when elk are most active. Additionally, the most popular time of year for elk viewing is during the rutting season, which typically begins in September and carries through October. During this period, elk are more active throughout the day, making it an ideal time for visitors to witness their fascinating behaviors and interactions. For an optimal viewing experience, you might want to visit Elk Country Visitor Center in Benezet, which is a prime location for elk observation. They suggest that early morning or the hours before dark are the best times to see elk. Remember to keep a safe distance and respect the wildlife, as elk are wild animals and it's important to observe them without causing any disturbance. Pennsylvania elk are fascinating animals that use a variety of methods to communicate with each other. They use sounds, smells, and body language to convey different messages, such as mating, warning, aggression, or social bonding. Here are some examples of how they communicate. Sounds. Elk are known for their distinctive vocalizations, especially during the rutting season. They produce different types of calls, such as bugles, barks, chirps, mews, and grunts. Each call has a specific meaning and function. For instance, bugles are loud and high-pitched calls that bulls use to attract cows, challenge rivals, or announce their presence. Barks are short and sharp sounds that elk use to alert others of danger or to warn off intruders. Chirps are soft and high-pitched sounds that cows and calves use to stay in contact with each other. Mews are low and nasal sounds that elk use to express curiosity, contentment, or submission. Grunts are low and guttural sounds that bulls use to show dominance or aggression. Ultimately, cows have a say in the selection process. They may choose to mate with the bull that has won the right to the harem, or seek out other bulls if they perceive a better genetic match. The rut is a dynamic and competitive time for elk, with each sex playing a role in the selection of mates to ensure the strength and survival of the species. Bulls that do not win a harem during the rut season in Pennsylvania may experience several outcomes. Bulls without harems often lead solitary lives or form small bachelor groups with other bulls. These groups are typically composed of younger or less dominant males. They may continue to challenge dominant bulls in hopes of taking over a harem or attracting cows to form their own group. Some bulls may wait for an opportunity when a dominant bull is distracted or weakened to attempt to take over the harem. Unsuccessful bulls will often spend the rest of the year preparing for the next rut, improving their strength and size to increase their chances of winning a harem in the future. Without the responsibility of defending a harem, these bulls can focus on feeding and avoiding predators, which may increase their chances of survival. It's a competitive world for elk during the rut, and not all bulls will be successful in winning a harem. However, they adapt their strategies and behaviors to maximize their chances in the future. Elk migration patterns are a fascinating display of nature's adaptability. Elk are typically seasonal migrants, inhabiting mid and upper elevations from spring through fall, and then moving to lower elevations onto winter ranges to escape snow and bitter cold. Elk migrations are driven by environmental cues. They follow these signs to move from the winter ranges and valleys to summer ranges and high mountain plateaus. The timing and routes of migration closely follow seasonal vegetation growth and changes in snow depth. After winters with high snowpack, elk tend to delay their migration. Conversely, with years in lower snowpack and earlier vegetation green-up, elk migrate earlier. Research combining GPS tracking data with satellite imagery has created comprehensive models of what drives these animals to move. Immediate environmental conditions have been found to be very effective predictors of when migration occurs. As climate change reshapes the weather and environment, elk have shown the means to adjust their migratory patterns to match the new conditions. This adaptability is crucial for their survival, but may also have unknown effects on local ecosystems. These patterns are essential for understanding elk behavior and ensuring their conservation, as they highlight the importance of preserving migration corridors and habitats that are critical for their survival. The restoration of primary predators like grizzly bears and wolves mean that elk must navigate through more dangerous landscapes during their migrations.
The elk is one of the largest animals in North America. Seeing a majestic bull elk in the wild is an extraordinary event and something you'll never forget. The fall is mating season, so the elk tend to congregate in the open meadows and fields, which is great for wildlife watching. This time of year, males have giant antlers, reaching 4 feet long. They use them to wrestle rival males. Bull elks also challenge each other by bugling, one of the most distinctive sounds in nature. Their bugling can be heard for miles throughout the region. The best time to hear it is early and late in the day. It may sound like a whole lot of squealing to you, but it's music to the ears of cow elk. The females are attracted to the males that bugle most often and have the loudest call.
Okay, my name's Doty McDowell. I'm a wildlife conservation officer with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and we're here at the elk viewing area on Winslow Hill in Elk County Township. We're basically overlooking a food plot that was put in to attract elk, and this viewing area was basically created as more of a people management tool than wildlife management. We wanted to provide an area where people could go and view elk and enjoy the outdoors with minimal impacts on the local private landowners.
It's no accident that elk are often in the meadows beyond, usually at dawn and dusk. This location has the mix of meadows, forests, water, and isolation from humans that elk need to thrive. Through the efforts of the Pennsylvania Game Commission and the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, along with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and other conservation and school groups, this is now excellent elk habitat. To entice elk from private lands, meadows of clover, oats, rye, timothy, wheat, and buckwheat have been created on public lands, such as this reclaimed strip mine.
Elk are native to Pennsylvania. Depending on what historical count you read, the last elk was native Pennsylvania elk was harvested somewhere around 1867 near the town of St. Mary's. Then in 1913, the Game Commission brought elk back in. They brought them in, they're Rocky Mountain elk, and they brought them from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They brought about 177 elk in from 1913 to 1923. Now those 177 elk were actually placed in 10 different counties in the state of Pennsylvania. I think it's ironic, though, that the last stronghold of those 177 were actually in Elk County.
Elk eat almost constantly during the summer. They keep feeding morning, afternoon, evening, and even in the middle of the night, although they feed more often at dawn and dusk. They are building up fat in preparation for the mating season and then the long winter. If people had to eat and chew their food as much as elk do in the summer, we would have less than 10 free minutes every hour for other activities. One elk feeding alone is vulnerable to predators, but elk feeding in herds are much safer. At least one animal will have its head up, listening in trouble while others eat. Elk are even safer when they are resting and ruminating. Elk tolerate heat much better than a deer that often share the same summer habitat. Deer seek shelter and may stop feeding during a hot spell, but elk can sweat more to cool off. Still, during a hot spell, they may retreat to north and east slopes to take shelter among the trees. They may also stay near water, and sometimes they stand in a stream or pond. Elk will sometimes wallow and cover themselves in mud, which absorbs body heat as it dries and also protects them from biting insects. Elk might also head to cooler, breezier high country. Bull elk also carry around air conditioners that cows don't have, antlers. Air cools the blood flowing through the velvet, which then helps to cool the bull's body. When food is abundant and elk are healthy, they do what many animals do. They play. They dash about, leaping and kicking, squealing and calling to each other. They race, taking turns to splash through ponds and puddles. Then, as suddenly as they started frolicking, they quiet down and return to feeding.
I can tell you that we have roughly 100 elk that have collars on them, radio transmitting collars that our biologists are using for various things. We have some research going on. We're doing a calf survival study. So if you see see younger animals with a solid green, looks like an expandable collar. That's probably what that's for. And then the adults are going to have mainly just this big leather collar on with a big yellow and black number on the side, and that number really is just for us to identify it during the elk survey. In the olden days, the only way we could identify an animal during the elk survey was through a telemetry receiver to track down what frequency that elk was. So we've placed these numbering cards or plaques on the side of their collars, so we don't need telemetry equipment. You can just look at the number and then you can identify which animal it is.
Cows and bulls often occupy different areas of their winter range. Bulls may retreat to high, snowy meadows where the food is adequate but not especially nutritious. A group of cows and calves may inhabit a south-facing slope that is free of snow and covered with nutritious grass. This behavior ensures better survival for the cows and calves. When the snow gets too deep, usually more than 1 foot, elk may look for shrubs to eat or move to forested areas where they can eat twigs and bark. Thick stands of trees also shelter the elk from wind and cold. Winters with heavy snow aren't necessarily a problem for elk, but if the winter is extremely cold, has exceptionally deep snow, and lasts a long time, many elk may die. Those that survive a severe winter are in danger because their fat reserves are depleted. An adult elk may starve in that lean time before the new growth of spring begins. Each spring, bulls shed their antlers and the cycle begins again. Growing as much as an inch a day, even the largest rack of antlers will be back to its full glory before fall mating season.
Yeah, the bulls will claim as many as they can. It's really kind of funny, you know. Early on in the season, before the rut really kicks in, you'll see a smaller bull, and he'll have a whole group of cows, and he'll feel pretty proud of himself. And then all of a sudden, the cows will start to come in estrus, and the bulls pick that up from this. And all of a sudden, they'll come in and they'll kick these little bulls out, and you know, they'll claim that herd as theirs. And you know, it's a constant battle. You know, there isn't a day that goes by that these bulls don't have to defend their harem from other bulls. And sometimes a bull will have a harem for 2 or 3 days, and a bigger bull will come in and knock them out. And that's just the way of the game. But it's a constant battle. And you know, if you really want to get a good view of bulls, right after the rut's the best time, because they're pretty tired, and you'll find them just kind of laying around, really trying to gain their energy and feed for the winter. But you know, it's kind of comical to see them at the end of a long breeding season, because they are pretty exhausted and fatigued. Depending on the season, obviously, in the warmer weather, you know, you're not going to catch elk out moving around in the daytime. The best time to see them is, you know, the last hour of daylight and the first hour of daylight. Yeah, but I would encourage you that, you know, sometimes just hearing them is as exciting as seeing them. And, you know, a lot of folks, as soon as it gets dark, they just drive off the hill. And, you know, a lot of fun can be had even if you just drive up here to the viewing area and shut your vehicle off and just roll the windows down, listen to them bugle. It can be really amazing sound. But yeah, I mean, as the winter gets on and as the weather gets colder, you'll actually see elk out more during the day too, because they're actually sitting out in the open and soaking up the heat of the sun and trying to keep their energy levels up. But typically, as long as the weather's not cold, you know, you'll see them in the evenings and the mornings, and then pretty much during the day they'll be laying in a cool spot or out of the sun.
On my visit, we were traveling the stretch of road between the 2 viewing areas and saw cars parked everywhere. When we got a little closer, we saw a huge bull elk standing in a front eating apples that had fallen on the ground around the tree. Paying no attention to cameras and the tourists, the huge elk just kept munching away.
Not any major incidents that I'm aware of. I hear stories about things that have happened, but you know, I don't know of any instances where anybody's been injured or you know, anything like that. Constantly see people getting, as far as I'm concerned, way too close to these animals. They are wild animals, but I know up here on Winslow Hill, now this area has never been open to hunting. This is a closed area. So these elk are a little different. They don't really have any natural fear of wildlife or of humans, so they probably don't really worry too much about them. humans have never posed a threat to them, so they will tolerate.
Please be cautious when viewing the elk. While these animals appear to be tame, they are still wild animals and natural instincts will take over. Also, be cautious while driving in the area. When the speed limit sign says 35 miles per hour, do take heed to this warning. These animals weigh at least 700 pounds, and hitting something this large with your vehicle will certainly do some major damage.
When visiting areas like Benazet in Pennsylvania, where elk are a common sight, it's important to follow specific guidelines to ensure both your safety and the well-being of the elk. Maintain a safe distance from any elk you see, at least 100 feet or more. Elk are large, wild animals and can be unpredictable. Feeding elk is not only unsafe, but also illegal in Pennsylvania. It can alter their natural foraging behavior and diet. At places like the Elk Country Visitor Center, you must stay on the gravel paths, behind viewing walls, and may not enter the fields or wooded areas surrounding the center. Take cues from the elk's body language. If they seem alerted or stressed, back away and give them space. Do not stop in the road to view elk. Pull off immediately onto the shoulder and do not block traffic. Never attempt to approach, touch, or feed elk. Leave your pets at home, especially dogs, as they can stress and disturb the wildlife. By following these guidelines, visitors can enjoy observing these magnificent creatures without negatively impacting their natural behavior and habitat. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Benazet, Pennsylvania.
Bye.